Welcome back to another video on finance value. So in today's video, I'll be answering the fabled question: should you buy or should you wait for the 2021 housing market to cool off, or should you just get in while you can? So buying or waiting are two very interesting questions, and this has been a question that I've been asked a lot from a lot of people on the channel. So I've decided to make a video on what you should do to try and best answer your questions. However, there's a lot of factors that we need to discuss whether or not you should buy or whether or not you should wait, and these are going to be things that you should consider in your personal scenario. So let's get straight on into this video. So should you buy or should you wait? Here are the first things that you should consider whether or not you should buy, you should wait. So right now, it's an interesting time for the economy. Right now, we know that the talk of the town is interest rates. So the interesting thing about interest rates is that with the economy doing what it has done recently after responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's caused the interest rates to drop. Okay, so they did this because they wanted to, sort of stimulate economic activity. So of course, now with the interest rates dropping, it's made it more attractive to be buying real estate. Now, of course, as you guys know, with interest rates lower, what tends to happen in real estate is that, your purchasing power goes up. So this diagram here that I've highlighted shows you the lower the interest rate, the higher your buying power is. Now, of course, if you're someone who's buying a house, you already know this, but if you don't, this is the example. Depending on the interest rate, it shows how your buying power changes and fluctuates. Now, of course, the interest rate right now is, I think, hovering at around 3%. So as I was saying, this basically goes to show how much interest rates can affect what kind of house you can buy. Now, here's what you need to pay attention to. Where are interest rates headed? See, this article is actually an article from 2020, but the Federal Reserve have actually told us where interest rates are headed. So let's take a look at what that means for us when we're buying a house and whether or not we should wait. So what did the Federal Reserve actually say? The Federal Reserve actually have said that they're going to hold the interest rates, that they're going to be holding the interest rates close to zero for 3 more years. So it says, I suspect that it might be 2024 before we actually raise the interest rate target, said during a webinar sponsored by the Women in Housing. And so as you guys can see, the Fed could proceed faster if inflation suggestively moves up. But of course, their targets are 2023, meaning that this level is going to be staying at the same level until 2023, which is very, very interesting because a lot of people are thinking, okay, we need to buy now because they're going to move interest rates up straight away. But some people are saying that, wait a minute, interest rates are going to be at the same levels for another 2 years until 2023. So this is something that you want to take into account because this may be our window on when we buy a house. Because of course, if interest rates are going to stay this low until sometime in 2023, then maybe we don't need to rush into buying a house just yet. However, I do want to say that, of course, if you're not needing to buy a house straight away, then maybe you don't need to look at all of this information. Maybe you just need to check in every now and again. But for those of you who want a house, you need to be up to date. You need to stay in the know-how, in the circles of what's going on with the property market. So let's take a look here. Of course, as you guys can see, another article states that the Federal Reserve are no more likely to raise the interest rates until 2023. So this is all based to do with the inflation and what's going on with the economy. But there are some more interesting factors and more interesting things you need to consider whether or not you want to buy a house. Let's take a look at this. So one thing you need to understand is, what is the market trend in the housing market right now? What is actually going on, and what is the housing market data saying around America and around some, just generally? What are the general trends in the housing market? So some people are saying that the housing market right now is hot, and it's right. The housing market is hot right now, and people are saying that the housing market is going to cool down. As you can see right here, 4 reasons the housing market will cool down and settle in a long, sustainable boom, Jeffrey says. So it's interesting to take a look at these things because they kind of give the opposite opinion of everyone saying the housing market is going to keep going up and up and up. We need to look at those that state, and which is more likely to happen, that the housing market is eventually going to cool off. So as you guys can see, let's take a look at this. It says the home buying spirit seen through the pandemic will soon give way to a long and healthy jog. Bear in mind, this is just an opinion. Dramatic market boom of the housing 2020 market simply can't last. Now, if you've known what factors actually played into this market, you'll know that this is true. There have been so many different factors, such as, the surge in home sales, a mere months of supply left, there were contractors struggling to keep up, prices were leaping at the fastest rate since 2006 in February. And we all know what happened, shortly after that. In 2008, 2009, we had that huge market crash. So, of course, the median house prices has kept setting records, putting affordability more and more out of reach. For much of that boom, mortgage rates were falling to new lows south of 3%, like I mentioned, but the trend has reversed in 2021, presenting another affordability challenge for prospective buyers. So, hopefully, those changes actually do slow down as we sort of exit the pandemic. And let's take a look at what this continues to say. So one thing as why people say that, the housing market is probably going to slow down and not be as hot as it is right now is because they're saying that construction will catch up. So, in order to build a house, you need construction. And of course, a lack of construction means the home building supply is very, very low. So of course, the biggest constraint on the housing market is its meager supply, but the supply demand gap should spur a correction. The construction industry underbuilt for more than a decade after the housing market sparked a global financial crisis. The weak building activity led to a shortage of 2.5 million homes, but activity seen over the last year stands to change that. The shortage now serves as an opportunity for home builders to pick up incremental demand. So they estimated another 1.8 million homes would need to be built to balance out the market, which is an astounding amount, but I'm not sure if they can do this because there's so many different things going on right now. Even the price of lumber has been, going up as well, which all contributes to this, sort of a monkey market that we're seeing in the housing market. Second factor that we do have here is that millennials are reaching their peak buying age. So contractors will also ramp up building to match against the nascent demand for millennials. Home ownership rates begin to rise with 25 to 29-year-olds and accelerate to further for 30 to 34-year-olds as people start to get married and as people start to have families. So, of course, they're going to ramp up production because, of course, people are starting to get older. And, of course, there's this new wave of people that need to be buying houses. So, of course, they've got to meet this demand. Now, of course, there is home inflation. So, of course, this third point is something that we need to consider because, of course, if the market is to cool, we need to see what factors there are. So this is, a factor. Remember how I was just talking about how, building a house, the price of lumber was something that, was affecting the market. So we see soaring lumber prices over the past year is something that definitely affected it, adding around $24,000 to the cost of every new home, further boosting prices amid the supply shortage. So this is all stuff that is, contributing, but this is like in the midst of the pandemic. This is what you have to understand. The market conditions right now are literally mid/post pandemic. So you have to understand the pressure may be alleviated as soon as the economy reopens and commodity price inflation moderates. So they suggest that lumber prices will sink 26% through 2022, just as the construction picks up to match the robust demand. So you have to remember that this could all cool down in 2022. And you have to remember that the housing market isn't a quick thing like the stock market. The housing market is not like the stock market where prices go up like that. Nope. It's something that, the effects of it are very, very long to see. So let's take a look at the next point, which is very, very interesting. And interest rates have room to run. So, this is something that we've already talked about. Okay. Of course, interest rates have room to run. The interest rates aren't looking to go up for quite some time. So right now, what we're seeing is we're probably going to see the housing market cool off as things do get back to normal, because right now we're at this weird stage. But with all of this being said, there is something that you do need to pay attention to. And this is what I wanted to talk about. The thing with housing markets is that this video can't truly help you unless you truly understand what your local housing market is like. And this is what I want to dive into, because this is something that I feel people need to pay attention to. What does your local housing market look like? What is where you need to buy a house? What does that look like? So let's take a look at some of the most popular areas and countries. So of course, the first one that we're going to look at is, New Zealand. So New Zealand, it's just insane right now. Like house prices up around literally 22%. I think from last year, which is just absolutely absurd. And, there have been calls to sort of moderate this because, when house prices are up such quickly in a short amount of time, there's not much you can really do to help people who are trying to get on the housing market. You can see by this article, it's beautiful and virtually COVID free. Just don't try and buy a house there. So it even says prices are surging, even for the most dilapidated homes in New Zealand, one of the most unaffordable property markets. So, of course, this is something that is interesting. So if you're in New Zealand right now, it's very different than to someone who's in the UK or someone who's in Australia or someone who's in the United States of America. So you have to understand that your housing market is going to differ to everybody else's. So let's take a look at, another housing market. So Australia, the Royal Bank of Australia warns against over exuberance as house prices rise. Now, one common trend you're starting to see is that even though we should take into account our local housing market, across the globe, housing in countries such as Australia, United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia, I think I just said that, but all of these countries are seeing this exponential growth here, which is kind of bad. And this is something that, sort of warns of, maybe the early stages of a bubble, but we're not too sure just yet. So, of course, the Reserve Bank has warned that a debt-fueled surge in house prices could leave households more exposed to financial shocks as it urged banks not to let their lending standards slip. Now, the reason they do this is because, of course, in 2008, 2007, that's what banks did. Their lending standards slipped. They let more and more people buy houses. And because pretty much anyone was buying a house, when it came to defaulting on those payments, there was a huge crash. So, of course, with house prices soaring at their fastest pace since the late 1980s, the Royal Bank of Australia on Friday said it was close to watching the property market and the risk that ultra low interest rates led to over exuberance, so overconfidence because of these low interest rates that incentivize buying. So Australian banks' lending standards remain prudent and credit growth only lifted slightly, but it warns that even if banks did not change their risk settings, a spurt of borrowing by optimistic home buyers could leave households and the wider financial system in greater danger in a future shock. So they're basically saying, hey, banks, don't get too excited with all these, low interest rates. Just keep an eye on it, okay? Don't let everybody buy a house, even though everybody wants to buy a house right now because of all these low interest rates. And of course, we need to take account into, the UK housing market. What are we looking at here? Once again, some very interesting stuff we can touch on here. Of course, they're saying the housing market momentum may be short-lived. So, what I'm starting to see in this wider picture is that, I do think that maybe it might be a good time to wait it out because they're saying that momentum may be short-lived. And there's all sorts of momentum. You have to understand that the housing market can't continually grow at this insane pace, Of course, in America, this article, wow, this was something that I was just like, wow, okay, this is really, really bad. Of course, this Seattle area broker said literally the market is on steroids. So prices are up, inventory is flying off the market, home showings draw lines of potential buyers down the driveway, and multiple all cash offers. List prices can feel like a mere suggestion. I knew it was going to be hard, but I didn't think it was going to be a months-long process. So, of course, all over America, we're seeing, house prices rise. And even in Seattle, it's just absolutely insane right now. So this is something that you need to take into account. You need to take into account the area that you are in and the local kind of prices that you may face. Because this is something that, you need to take into account too, is are we going to be seeing a wave of foreclosures? We all know that the housing market has been artificially pumped up because there's been a lack of supply. So one thing that many people may be waiting for is a wave of foreclosures. Now, foreclosures are those houses that people can no longer afford because they've obviously bitten off more than they can chew. So why would you wait for foreclosures, and why are some perhaps waiting out for the market's source of property information? We can see that, of course, if we read, why is there a negative housing market forecast for 2021 amidst the ongoing boom? At the moment, the foreclosure moratoriums have kept lenders from being able to even start processing their defaults. One of the negative predictions is that the supply in the form of foreclosed homes may overwhelm the demand in the many folds of 2021. So, of course, foreclosed homes is something that we're going to be looking forward to and looking into in 2021 and 2022. And then the result would be that prices are going to plummet again and the real estate sector will likely cool off. The major effect will be seen in the summer of 2021, which is just around the corner, because foreclosure that starts today is probably not going to proceed until mid of 2021. Now, this is an old article. It's not too old, but of course, it does hold relevance till today. They're saying that this may create an incredible buying opportunity in the local housing market if you can buy houses that have been foreclosed on. So this is something that some people are waiting on. This is something that people are thinking, hey, this is what I want to, this is something that I want to have, this is something I want to see. So, yeah, you could wait till we start to see that levels of foreclosure, but who knows if this is going to happen. Maybe there's going to be all these sorts of schemes and stuff to help people not foreclose on their homes, because, I don't want someone else to be out on the street or just lose their home just so I can get one at a good price. I'm not that kind of person. But, we're going to be seeing some foreclosures because, of course, there was the mortgage forbearance where people were given this sort of, grace period where they could sort of not pay their mortgage. But who knows how bad that is truly likely to be. So the final question is, should you buy or should you wait? Now, overall, the majority of research outlets that I've seen that are based on real estate information are pretty much saying that they're leaning somewhat towards waiting. They're just leaning towards waiting. But I do want to give this sort of caveat of information because I think this is truly important to anyone looking to purchase real estate right now. You have to understand that real estate isn't something you can make straight away. This isn't a decision you rush into. This is a 30-year decision, okay? 30 years in one location, in one house that you'll be paying for pretty much a very long time. Now, of course, you can pay down the mortgage early, yada, 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 but you have to understand this is a huge decision. So bear in mind, with all that said, maybe, just maybe, you should wait until you're actually ready to buy a house. And you have to understand that this is something that not everyone is prepared to do. So look at this. If you're thinking of buying a home to live in, not necessarily as investment, then you need to consider your financial situation. And this is something that everyone does need to consider. We just are exiting somewhat the pandemic. And of course, some people are still having financial hardship. So maybe it's probably not the right time to buy a house to them. So right now, you'll pay more for a home than normal. So you'll need the cash reserves to support a higher down payment. You may also need to settle for a home that doesn't check off every box on your wish list given the limited number of properties that are available for sale. So you have to understand that right now, if you're buying a house to live in for the next 30 years, you could probably buy a house that you may not even want. You may settle for a house and then you may, 1 year down the line, you could see a house that's on the market and you think, man, if only I'd waited a little bit more. But of course, if you're about to have kids, if you're about to do this and you're about to do that, then maybe right now is the perfect time. So of course, as the year progresses, inventory could open up and home prices could start to come down. So it could also pay to plan to buy. Also, once the coronavirus vaccines are rolled out, wildly rolled out, not like they are right now, it's going to be easier to attend open houses and see homes in person because, as we know, as someone as myself trying to buy rental properties and stuff like that, it's very, very hard to get these viewings in person because of all the COVID restrictions that are still here 1 year on from the beginning of this pandemic. So all in all, the articles, the research, the data suggests that maybe we should just wait a little bit because right now the conditions aren't really stable. We've just went through a major pandemic. There's all sorts of stuff going on all around the world. New Zealand, United Kingdom, America, Australia, so many different things are going on in so many different housing markets. Maybe you should wait. But then again, if you need to buy a house right now, you should. But just speak to your local realtor, speak to your local real estate agent, see what they're saying. See what they're saying when it comes to buying a house. Are they saying that maybe you should buy a house right now? Or, are they saying that maybe you should wait for a bit? But just bear in mind that when you do speak to these people do make a commission from your sale. So bear that in mind because they may incentivize you to buy earlier than you need to. So all in all, I personally would say that it does come down to your personal situation because you need to understand exactly your financial situation. You need to understand your family situation, whether or not you have the down payment, whether or not you can do this, whether or not you want to buy this house specifically. This is all things you need to consider. So if you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to leave a like, do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.